Tennessee, Oklahoma. First SEC game for both programs this year. First SEC game ever for Oklahoma. That's coming up on Saturday. Game of the week, and all eyes in college football going to be on this one. And to give us a little bit of the Oklahoma scout, we're going to welcome on from Sooner Scoop, George Stoya. George, really do appreciate you taking the time. Right off the top, I'm going to hit you with this one. You know, Heupel played there. Okay, he coached there for 9 years. Then his contract was not renewed. They didn't want him anymore. From your vantage point, what went down between Josh Heupel and Oklahoma? And then a second part to that, how do you think the fan base will react seeing Josh Heupel back in that stadium?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, welcome to it.
Second off, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Look, I think OU fans, for the most part, and I know, people in that program, the athletic department, love Josh Heupel. There's no bad blood there from OU side in that sense. I think OU fans, the same thing. I think that there's going to be a lot of love for Josh. Obviously, OU's going to want to win the football game, but I know that they're honoring the 2000 national champion team during the game. I believe there'll be some sort of video tribute that I'm sure will include Josh Heupel in it. I would assume that's going to get a standing ovation from the Oklahoma crowd. Now, in terms of what happened with Josh, back in, whatever year that was, 2014, I think it was a sense of, Bob Stoops and him had a disagreement in terms of what kind of offense they wanted to run. Obviously, they had a really down year in 2014, coming off a huge win over Alabama in the Sugar Bowl a year prior to that. The fan base was upset, and I think that Oklahoma felt like they had to make a move. Now, you look at how that played out, I would say in the end it worked out for both parties. Oklahoma went on to hire Lincoln Riley, and obviously he came in and did an unbelievable job as an offensive coordinator. Say what you will, as a head coach, he won a lot of football games at Oklahoma. I think is one of the best offensive minds in all of football, so it worked out in that standpoint. And I think for Josh, he went out and proved himself as a coach. I think that it probably helped him with his motivation, went out and proved a lot of people wrong, including a lot of people at Oklahoma wrong in the way that his career has turned out as a football coach. So I think in the end, I heard Josh's comments today during his press conference and said that, he wouldn't be where he is now at Tennessee without what happened at Oklahoma and everything that went down. I think that there's a lot of people that wish it would have gone a different way and that it didn't end in the way that it did in terms of him essentially being fired at his alma mater. But I do think that, 10 years now, it's kind of crazy that it is exactly 10 years from when that happened. I think everybody looks back and says it worked out for everyone.
George, how ready is this fan base? It feels like we've been talking about this game all offseason. It's been a national storyline all offseason, SEC Media Days. First game in the SEC against a pretty high-caliber opponent in Tennessee. It's going to be a home game, obviously, for Oklahoma. How energized, how amped up is this fan base ready to kick off this new era?
They're super pumped. You look at the history of big games at Oklahoma. There hasn't been a ton in recent history in Norman. They've had some good teams, whether it's a highly ranked TCU team or a scrappy Iowa State team comes to town. But when you talk about blue blood programs, major programs in college football coming to Norman, really you look back at the 2016 Ohio State game. That game was a huge one leading up to it, but OU had also lost already that season to Houston in the season opener, so there wasn't as much juice. Oklahoma wasn't as good that year. You look back at the 2012 Notre Dame game. That was the last time College Game Day was in Norman. Oklahoma wasn't great that year at that time. I think they only had maybe one loss in Notre Dame. That was the year that they went to the national title game. And then you have to go back to 2008, the Texas Tech game. I think Texas Tech was number 1 or number 2 in the country at that point coming to Norman. And so I think this crowd is really juiced up. That's been a big question around here in Norman, is that the crowds haven't been, they've sold out and they fill out the stadium in every game, but have they been impactful like they used to be, 10, 15, 20 years ago when Oklahoma was really rolling? The answer is no. And I think a large part of that is quality opponents really haven't come through town as much. Playing in the Big 12, you didn't have those major programs. Yeah, Oklahoma State and Bedlam was always a big game, but there was years that those Oklahoma State teams weren't as good. And so I think that this fan base is ready to have a big time opponent come into town. I will say, though, I don't think the fan base is super confident in this Oklahoma team right now coming into this game.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you is kind of where is this fan base with this team? Are they – is it more hope that they can, get going offensively, or is it more, hey, we're really good defensively and they're going to pull the offense along till they get better, or is it one of those, I just got a lot of injuries and it is what it is? What do you think this Oklahoma team is right now after 3 weeks of seeing them play?
They're leaning on the defense. You're exactly right. I think that's kind of the perspective right now is just get to the bye week in a couple weeks before OU Texas and figure out a way to win some football games. And, I think that the expectations aren't super high for this game. Now, Oklahoma fans expect to win every game. That's the reality here in Norman. They want to win every football game, and anything less is not up to standard. Now, I think that they also know that this Tennessee football team is one of the best in the country. They're playing as well as anybody right now, have a lot of talent, going to be probably one of, if not the most talented team Oklahoma faces this year. And it's also just not a great matchup for this Oklahoma team and where they're at right now in terms of the injury situation on the offensive line. I mean, I think this Tennessee defensive line is the best in the country, so it's going to be the best that Oklahoma faces all season. And so it's a tall task for this team offensively this week. But I think that there is some hope that, okay, what if Oklahoma and this defense can maybe create some turnovers, create some missteps by a guy like Nico, who I know has been really good and super talented, but he is a young guy and he hasn't played in an environment quite like this. So I think the hope is, okay, let's see if Oklahoma can just hang around. Can they create a couple turnovers, get some short fields, maybe make a special teams play, even though special teams hasn't been great so far this year. I think that's the hope coming into this and really the next couple of weeks, because as big as this game is here in Norman, they really need to go win on the road at Auburn a week from now and at least get into the bye week at 4-1. Maybe you get a little healthier, especially on the offensive line and at wide receiver, the two spots that they've really struggled. So I think that's where everyone is with this football team right now, is just try and get through these next couple weeks. Maybe you can pull one off against Tennessee, like I said, getting some turnovers and leaning on your defense. But I think it's also next week going on the road for the first time in the SEC. They have to go win that football game too.
George, I mean, Tennessee is everybody talks about, Nico and spreading it out and throwing it all over the place, but they've rushed for 1,009 yards in 3 games. They've run the football really effectively. Conversely, Oklahoma has been good against the run. I admit I don't know how good Temple and Houston and Tulane are in terms of running the football. But what do you see out of that matchup? And do you think Oklahoma feels like they can stop the run with their base front without having to commit a bunch of extra people and not give some of those one-on-one opportunities in this spread stuff that Tennessee does? What do you think the Sooners are in terms of defending the run?
It's their best thing they do right now, probably on the entire team. I think defending the run has been extremely good. Like you said, they haven't played a lot of quality opponents, so how good is it actually? I think we're going to find out. But they've been really good on the interior defensive line. They went out and they got Dominic Williams from TCU, the big defensive tackle transfer. He's been really good. He's a run stopper. Jaden Jackson, a true freshman, has come in and played a lot of football for Oklahoma to start. He's been really good. DJ Terry, as you guys know, from Tennessee, playing a lot of snaps, playing his best football of his career right now. He's going to play a lot. And then they got a guy in Grayson Halton on the defensive interior that has really stepped up. Third-year guy is really starting to hit his stride, and they feel like he's maybe their best defensive tackle right now. And then at linebacker, I mean, it starts with Danny Stutzman. He has just been, a monster so far. Probably Oklahoma's best player through the first 3 games, which should be expected. I mean, he's a guy that would have been drafted early last year, decides to come back for his senior year, wants to play in the SEC. This is why he came back, is for games like this one, and he's been incredible so far. And you look at the other linebackers, they've been rotating a lot of guys. The guys that were very highly recruited. Kobe McKenzie, a 5-star linebacker, got his first start of his career last week. Kip Lewis, another guy that's played a lot of football. So they feel really good at the linebacker spot in their front 7. On the edge is where it gets a little dicey. I think that's somewhere that you saw Tulane hit some outside zone. Oklahoma wasn't able to contain the edge as well in that game until late. They've got some young guys. They've got Ethan Downs, he's a senior. He's somebody that has played good football, but isn't a huge difference maker. R. Mason Thomas really came on last week, had 3 sacks in the game, but I think they feel really good against the run. And this secondary, super experienced, but there have been some plays this year that guys have gotten behind the defense, and Tulane, Temple, Houston just don't have the quarterbacks to complete those passes and just have missed some guys deep down the field. I wonder if that's a spot that maybe Tennessee can exploit in this game.
We got George Stoya on from Soonerscoop.com. George, you mentioned a couple minutes ago about the injury situation. I know a couple offensive linemen are banged up. A couple receivers haven't played. I know there's a starting defensive back that's been missing some time. Can you give us what you know now early in the week, kind of what the injury prognosis is going into this game for those players?
Yeah, so the big one is Nick Anderson at wide receiver. Last year, led the team in touchdowns, had 10 touchdowns a year ago, has not played yet this year. Believe it's a soft tissue injury. He suited up last week for the first time, and it looked like, going through warmups, he was going to play. Ends up not playing. We don't know if that's a situation of they just wanted to hold him out for the game and save him for, obviously, Tennessee. But I think he's going to give it a go this week. I think that they've been kind of holding him back, knowing they could get through the first couple games of the season without him. And that could be a huge difference maker in the passing game. That's somewhere they've really struggled, is the vertical game. And I think having a big receiver like Nick Anderson could really help them up front. I don't know if they're going to get anybody back. If they get anyone back up front, I would think it's going to be Branson Hickman, the center that I mentioned earlier. He's got a high ankle sprain that he got in the first game, I think, on the second series. So he's been out the last couple weeks. I think he's about 50-50 right now. High ankle sprains, those are tough to come back from quickly. I don't think he's been practicing. We'll see if he practices this week. But that's the one guy on the offensive line that I think you could maybe see. He might try to give it a go. Jake Taylor at right tackle. I just think he's got too many things going on. I don't think he'll be back this week. And then on the defensive side of the football, Kendall Dolby, they're starting Cheetah, which is basically the nickel spot. He was out this past week with a concussion. I anticipate he will be back. He's one of their better players, big-time playmaker. They like to bring him in a lot of different blitz packages, can also drop back and cover a lot as well. So I think he'll be back. And then at corner, Gentry Williams, who has been a starter for them the last couple years, he's banged up, and I don't anticipate him being back. He's had a shoulder issue, and they're really deep at corner. They play a lot of different guys, so I don't think that's a huge loss. But I think at this point, I wouldn't expect him to play come Saturday.
George, much of it was made out in the offseason about the matchup of these two quarterbacks, highly rated coming out of high school in the same class. Who was number one, who was number two, type deal. Throw Arch in there. That was the ballyhooed quarterback class. And obviously Jackson Arnold's dealt with injuries at the receiver position, at the offensive line position. As a young quarterback, how do you think he's handled the hand he's been dealt through 3 games with all the injuries? Where do you see his growth from game 1 to game 3 heading into game 4 as he's navigated being the starting quarterback at Oklahoma?
I think he's handled it about as well as he could. I put it out there the other day. In his 4 career starts, he's had, I think, 4 different centers. He's had 8 different variations of an offensive line. I think 3 or 4 different left tackles, a lot of different guys rotating at right tackle. Like, that's hard as a young quarterback to really trust in your offensive line when it's switching around so much. And then you look at receiver, and that was a position that, Oklahoma felt really good about coming into the season. They lose Jaden Gibson, who blows out his knee on the second day of fall camp. Jalil Farouk, who was one of their best wide receivers a year ago, he breaks his foot on the first possession of the season. And so now all of a sudden you're left out there, and he's throwing balls to true freshmen who I think can be good players eventually, but it's really tough. Guys running maybe wrong routes, not being in the right spot, guys not getting open, the offensive line not holding up long enough. And I know some of that sounds like excuses, and Jackson Arnold is a 5-star and he has to make better plays, but I do think that they're valid excuses at this point. Like, it's really tough on a young quarterback when nothing is coming easy. They're unable to run the football very effectively right now, so they have to figure that out. Because I think that's one thing that can help a young quarterback is being able to just run the football efficiently. That has not been the case. I know that's something that Tennessee has been able to lean on. I'm sure it's helped Nico a lot when you can turn around and hand the ball off and you're averaging, 8 yards per carry. Oklahoma just has not been able to do that. So I think Jackson's handled it pretty well. I think that his ability to run the football, scramble, get out of the pocket has really helped him. We saw that this last week against Tulane. His legs were the X factor. That was the reason they ended up winning that game, is his ability to escape the pocket and do some different things in the run game. So I think that you've seen his decision-making improve. You know, his decision-making against Temple and Houston just wasn't great. He missed a couple guys, was slow on his progressions. I thought that changed a lot against Tulane. I think some of that was what they were doing offensively. They made it a little bit more simple for him in the passing game, but they don't really have a huge threat in the vertical passing game right now. Teams aren't really threatened by that, and that needs to change this week if they want to have a chance against Tennessee. And that's really where I think Jackson excels as a passer, throwing the ball down the field, and we just haven't seen that yet. So I think Jackson's going to get better as the season goes on, but he really needs these guys to get healthy, and he needs some of these young guys to step up and become playmakers.
George, good stuff, man. Thanks so much for joining us. Tennessee fans are going to be really, really looking forward to this game, obviously, just like Oklahoma fans. For those Tennessee fans that want to get some more inside scoop on the Oklahoma Sooners, what do you guys have coming up over there this week over at Soonerscoop.com?
Yeah, lots of good stuff. Obviously, a lot of team-oriented stuff on our side if you want to get to know more about the team. But I'm also working on a big Josh Heupel feature, talked to a lot of his former teammates here at Oklahoma that I know are still rooting for him. They're going to be rooting for Oklahoma come Saturday, but obviously are excited about his success. And his legacy here at Oklahoma still lives on. You know, he's the last quarterback to win a national title here at the school, so there's a lot of love for him. But there's also some things, and I won't reveal everything just yet, but there's still some things that even the team does and the quarterback position does at Oklahoma that Josh started, 25 years ago when he came to town.
Yeah, good stuff. Look forward to reading that later on this week over at Soonerscoop.com. George, thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.